Today on Playing Politics, though, we are going to now look at a very different issue, and that is Tony Abbott's plan for a paid parental leave scheme. This morning, the opposition leader has won support for his plan from his party room, making that 6-month scheme now coalition policy. Mr Abbott has acknowledged this morning that this scheme is a generous one, and that it's one that he certainly changed his opinion about over recent years, but he says that this scheme, he believes, is going to be something that's good for women around the country and also for businesses. Here's some of what he had to say on radio this morning.
I have changed my mind on this. I, as you know, am a pretty conservative bloke, but if we are going to have a fair go for families, we've got to make it possible to combine motherhood and having a job.
But Mr Abbott is facing opposition from the government and also from big business. This morning, the Finance Minister, Lindsay Tanner, said Mr Abbott's plan to fund the scheme by imposing a levy on big businesses, well, he says that scheme simply won't work.
Were it to be introduced, it would introduce a major distortion into the business taxation system. Companies would move in and out of range depending on economic conditions. There would be a significant disincentive for companies to grow, to add jobs. If their current turnover is slightly below the $5 million mark, there would be a disincentive for companies to merge. If that were to take any of the merging companies beyond the $5 million mark, and there would be a huge incentive for companies to engage in artificial avoidance activities by structuring their businesses in ways that meant that they had a multiple number of businesses all below the $5 million mark.
Joining me on our Playing Politics panel today for reaction to this plan from Melbourne, John Roscombe from the Institute of Public Affairs. Good afternoon to you.
Hello.
And also from Brisbane today, Scott Driscoll from the Retailers Association. Good afternoon to you. And Scott, I'm going to start with you. There has been some confusion over the last 24 hours about what exactly this plan is going to do to big businesses. It seems as though we have got a clarification today from the Liberal Party that big businesses earning more than $5 million of taxable income are the ones facing this increase in a levy or tax, depending on what you want to call it. Is that your understanding, and how have you seen businesses respond so far?
Well, look, that certainly is my understanding. You've got to make profits as a company of in excess of $5 million before a reasonably small levy of 1.7% actually even tends to kick in. Now, this is something that we as the Retailers Association, and certainly my members, are in support of. It's targeting an area of the economy that has the greatest capacity to fund public policy that I think now both sides of politics are quite committed to, and that is a funded parental maternity and fatherhood leave scheme.
John Roscombe, your organisation is also right-leaning, yet you're saying today that this idea could be disastrous for big business. Why?
Well, that's right, because ultimately taxes on business, whether they're big business or small business, get passed through to the consumer. And what we're going to see, as Lindsay Tanner identified, is massive compliance issues. There's also the problem that smaller businesses are effectively going to be subsidising bigger businesses, and some of those people taking leave will be on up to $150,000 a year. So this is also a highly regressive tax, and that's some of the problems with it.
So, John, your criticism of this plan is how it's funded. You're not against the idea of a 6-month scheme?
Well, no, our view is that it shouldn't be funded by taxpayers. Companies should be able to offer it, and the way they do that is by having a flexible industrial relation system. The other issue with this is that it's not just parent leave that we'll be facing in the coming decades. Carers leave is also going to emerge as the population ages, and so now we have big business hit with parent leave, soon they'll be hit with carers leave, and ultimately it's our view that these are going to be costs passed on to the consumer. So what business should be doing is funding it itself through its own mechanisms, not being hit by these taxes by government.
Scott Driscoll, a couple of the points that John raised there. Are you concerned, as John is, that this will be passed on to consumers and that small businesses could also be the ones bearing brunt?
Look, I'd just start by saying to John, welcome to 2010. I think what we've got to understand is that we've moved on in Australia to a social policy that's accepted in principle by both the government and the alternative government in an election year, that there will be paid parental leave. Now, to suggest that drawing that money from somewhere is going to put a greater or lesser impost on the cost of living is a little bit of a furphy. The money is going to come from somewhere. We're suggesting that it is far better to target the area of the economy, that is big business, that has the capacity to fund a policy like this, than a broad-based tax that will attack each and every Australian, right through to self-funded retirees. I think what we need to do is get back to a bit of reality about this. There will be a paid parental leave scheme in Australia after the next election. It's how best we fund that is the question.
Scott, just in the interest of transparency, I know that you have been a Liberal member. Are these opinions that you're expressing right now, are they the opinions echoing what you've heard from the small businesses that you represent in the Retailers Association, or are they just purely your personal opinions?
Look, certainly the views that I'm expressing, and I always express, are the views of our broad-based membership, and that is thousands of small businesses right across Australia. It's quite obvious that we are now looking towards policy that is going to best benefit those members of the small business sector, best benefit their ability to continue to employ the many, many thousands of Australians that they do. So we now need to look to the reality of the situation, and that is that both sides of politics are in fervent agreement that there needs to be a paid maternity scheme in this country. That is, and I raised the point earlier, and I think it's very important that we follow on from that. It's indeed a parental leave scheme, paid parental leave. Oftentimes we've drifted into a situation in Australia where I think fathers have not had a really credible opportunity to actually take time off and look after their kids in the early stages of life as well. This will actually move this scheme, if proposed by Tony Abbott, if it goes through the way it is, to giving a real choice to both parents or either parent to actually play that part. Now, small business wears a lot of burden, and I understand that John represents the big end of town. I mean, I know he's represented mining companies in the past, and certainly if I came from that background, I might be having a problem with this as well. But let's get back to the reality. There will be a paid parental scheme, leave scheme in Australia after the next election. Let's talk constructively about how that revenue is going to be raised to fund it.
But Scott Driscoll, what do you make of that argument that small businesses, this could be a disincentive for companies to reach that $5 million taxable income level?
Look, I don't think out of all of the thousands of members that I've got around the country that any one of them is actually going to try to hold their own growth back so that they don't actually meet a particular threshold. I think that argument would be lost on any level of taxation consideration or any economic consideration whatsoever. So I really don't think that's a practical reality down in Main Street, Australia.
John Ruscombe, I'll let you respond to a few of the points that Scott Driscoll made there. Firstly, about you sticking up for big business. I should point out you're not alone in criticising this plan. We've heard the unions and a range of other business lobby groups also saying that this isn't the way to go.
Look, it's not a question of big business or small business. You are going to be seeing medium-sized businesses transferring their wealth to well-paid employees in big businesses. Now, from my perspective, I don't think we should be funding big business in that way. The other problem that we haven't touched on, and this is why Tony Abbott was opposed to a paid parental scheme for a long time, is it advantages women and men who are already in the workforce. So now, if this goes through, we're going to have pressures for more taxation expenditures on women staying at home. So at lots of levels, this is a bad scheme. Companies should be able to offer paid parental leave, as many companies do. But ultimately the benefit goes to the employees. It doesn't go to the companies. And I don't think companies should be